11 days before Christmas, a ranch in Wyoming was already marked for death. A foreclosure notice nailed to a frozen door. A man who had worked his hands raw, standing alone in the snow, knowing everything his father built would soon belong to someone else. No rescue was coming, no miracle was promised. Then a stranger arrived, tired, silent, carrying more loss than luggage, and everything began to change in ways no one expected. What happens next will make you believe in quiet miracles and second chances for the forgotten. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. If you believe no child or animal should ever face fear alone, hit subscribe now and share this story with someone who needs hope. Cody, Wyoming, settled into winter without ceremony. The town sat exposed beneath a wide, unforgiving sky, where wind traveled miles without resistance and arrived sharp enough to sting bare skin. December brought short days and longer nights. Snow fell, melted, then froze again, leaving the streets glazed and brittle. Christmas decorations appeared anyway. Pine wreaths on storefront doors, a modest tree near the courthouse, a string of lights above the diner, but they felt less like celebration and more like defiance. 15 miles outside town, Creed Hollow lay quiet under a pale morning sky. Rowan Creed stood in the yard facing the bunkhouse door, his breath visible in the cold. The land around him was flat and open, winter grass pressed down beneath frost. A line of cottonwood trees marked the creek bed, their branches bare and still. The buildings, house, barn, bunkhouse, and an old shed, showed their age. Wood warped by decades of wind, nails rusted deep into place. A sheet of paper had been nailed to the bunkhouse door. Rowan stared at it without blinking. Final notice. Delinquent account. 11 days. He was 33 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, with a build shaped by years of physical labor rather than intention. His coat hung heavy on him, worn at the cuffs and darkened at the seams. His hair was cut short, practical, dark brown flecked with frost. A rough stubble shadowed his jaw. His face carried hard lines, sharp cheekbones, a squared jaw, eyes the color of overcast steel. People often mistook his stillness for calm. In truth, it came from habit. When things pressed in, Rowan learned to stand still and take it. 11 days. Christmas was 5 days away. He reached up and pulled the paper loose, the nails squealing faintly as they came free. He folded the notice once, then again, careful and deliberate, and slid it into the inside pocket of his coat. The door remained scarred where the paper had been. 2 small holes, permanent, in their way. A low bark cut through the quiet. Boone trotted toward him, tail swinging once, then again. The dog was a cattle mix, compact, strong through the chest, with a white blaze down his snout and one ear that never fully stood. 3 years old, smart, loyal to a fault. Boone circled Rowan's boots, sniffing the cold air, then looked up at him, waiting. Rowan rested a hand briefly on the dog's head. "Easy," he murmured, though the word was more for himself. He crossed the yard toward the corral. The windmill stood nearby, its metal frame groaning with every gust. One blade was cracked near the tip. Rowan had noticed it weeks ago. Fixing it had slipped behind feeding cattle, hauling water, patching fences, small emergencies stacking until nothing felt manageable anymore. The cattle were already gathered at the feeder. There weren't many left. Their ribs showed beneath dull hides, and they moved slowly, conserving energy. Rowan dumped what feed he could spare, watching it scatter across the frozen ground. Boone darted between the animals, not hurting, just moving, alert. Inside the barn, the air smelled of hay, leather, and rust. Rowan checked the tack, ran a hand along a stiff saddle strap, and tightened a loose latch on a stall door. Everything resisted movement in winter: metal, wood, muscles. As he worked, a memory surfaced uninvited. 2 summers earlier, at the Cody Stampede grounds, Rowan had lost control. A man he didn't know had been loud and drunk, mocking dead-end ranchers and laughing about land that would soon be worth more without them. The man had mentioned Rowan's father by name. That had been enough. Rowan's fist had landed before thought caught up with instinct. The damage was quick. Broken knuckles, a night in county jail, a reputation that followed him like dust. His father had always warned him about his temper, said it ran in the blood, sharp and fast. Rowan tried to keep it buried. Some days it stayed there, others it waited. By mid-morning, Rowan hitched his bay gelding, Ash, to the wagon and headed toward town. Ash was steady, scarred along one shoulder, calm-eyed. Rowan trusted him more than most people. The road into Cody cut through open pasture and low scrub. Snow clung in shaded patches. A hawk hunched on a fence post, feathers puffed against the cold. Cody emerged gradually. Smoke rose from chimneys. The church sat near the center of town, a wooden nativity set placed carefully out front, lights looped around the manger. One bulb flickered weakly. The courthouse tree stood tall, decorated with paper ornaments made by schoolchildren. A few kids threw snowballs near the sidewalk, laughing too loudly, as if daring winter to answer back. Rowan stopped outside Gable's Mercantile. The bell chimed when he stepped inside, and warmth rushed over him. The store smelled of flour, coffee, and oiled wood. A pot-bellied stove glowed at the center. Two men stood nearby, hands outstretched. Behind the counter stood Lila Gable. She was in her late 20s, with auburn hair pinned back and freckles scattered across her nose and cheeks. Her posture was straight, efficient. Her eyes missed very little. "Morning, Rowan," she said. "Morning." He handed over a short list. Grain, salt blocks, kerosene. Lila glanced at it, then at him. "You paying today?" Rowan met her gaze. "Some." She nodded once. "I can do half the grain in one salt block. Kerosene came in high." "That'll work." While she gathered the items, the men by the stove fell silent. Rowan recognized one, Earl Maddox, a deputy with tired eyes and a drooping mustache. Earl gave Rowan a brief nod. The other man turned fully now. He was tall and lean, well-dressed, with pale hair slicked neatly back and gloves that looked new. His smile arrived easily. "Rowan Creed," Earl said, clearing his throat. "This here's Denton Vale." Rowan felt the shift immediately. He had heard the name plenty. Vale extended his hand. "Good to meet you." Rowan shook it once, firm, short. "Hard season," Vale said lightly. "Winter always sorts things out." Rowan didn't answer. Vale continued, unbothered. "I've spoken with Garrison at the bank. Sounds like things are tight." Rowan's jaw tightened. "That your business?" Vale smiled. "Business is exactly my point. Pride costs more than people think." Lila returned with the supplies, her movements sharp. She didn't look at Vale. "I'm not selling," Rowan said, voice low. Vale studied him for a moment. 11 days, he said quietly. "I'll be around." He turned and left. Lila rang up the purchase. "Don't let him get under your skin," she said. Rowan took the bag. "Too late." "You coming to the Christmas service?" she asked. "Potluck after." Rowan hesitated. "Maybe." Outside, Boone wagged his tail hard when Rowan returned. Rowan loaded the wagon and looked once more down Main Street. Lights glowed faintly. People moved with purpose, holding on to routine. The ride home was silent. The sky darkened early. The wind picked up. Creed Hollow came into view. The bunkhouse door bore 2 small holes where the notice had been. Rowan stopped the wagon and sat there, reins loose in his hands. 11 days. Boone rested his chin on Rowan's knee. Rowan scratched behind the dog's ear. In the house, a small Christmas tree stood unlit in the corner. Rowan looked out at the land, cold and worn, and made a decision he had been avoiding. If this place was going down, he wouldn't let it go quietly. He would place the advertisement again. And this time, he would have to face whoever answered it, and the truth he'd been avoiding. The decision didn't feel brave when Rowan Creed finally made it. It felt narrow, like choosing the only trail left when every other path had collapsed under snow. That evening, after unloading the supplies and settling the cattle for the night, he stood alone at the small table by the window, a kerosene lamp burning low beside him. Outside, wind moved across the land in steady gusts, brushing against the house as if testing its resolve. The folded foreclosure notice lay in his coat pocket, heavy enough that he was always aware of it. Rowan didn't take it out. He didn't need to read it again. Instead, he pulled a blank sheet of paper toward him and set his pencil down, resting his hand on it without writing. Boone lay near the stove, chin on his paws, eyes half closed. The dog's coat had thickened with winter, gray and white fur, rough but clean. Boone was young enough to still expect things to work out, old enough to sense when something was wrong. His ears flicked every time the wind rattled the window. Rowan stared at the empty page longer than he should have. Words had never come easily to him. He was a man who fixed fences by feel, who learned animals by watching how they shifted weight, who trusted routine more than explanation. Writing meant precision. It meant choosing what to say and, more importantly, what to leave out. He began slowly. Ranch outside Cody, seeking a partner. He stopped, scratched the line out, tried again. Seeking a woman interested in building a life on working land. That sounded like a lie, too polished for what he was offering. Rowan exhaled, ran a hand through his hair and started over, writing more plainly, the way he spoke when he wasn't trying to impress anyone. Ranch needs help. Land, house, hard work. Not easy, but honest. He paused, pencil hovering. Honest. The word sat there, accusing him. What he didn't write mattered more than what he did. He didn't mention the bank. He didn't mention the deadline. He didn't mention Denton Vale or the way the future felt like it was narrowing into a single point. In the end, the advertisement was short. Too short to explain a life. Too vague to promise stability. He signed his name anyway. Rowan Creed. No flourish. The next morning, he rode into town again, Ash's breath steaming in the cold. The newspaper office sat on a side street, a narrow building with frosted windows and a sign that had lost 2 letters years ago. Inside, the air smelled of ink and dust. Clara Jennings looked up from behind the counter. She was in her early 40s, thin with sharp features and dark hair streaked with gray she didn't bother hiding. Clara had run the paper since her husband died of pneumonia one winter too harsh to forgive mistakes. She carried herself with the posture of someone who expected bad news and learned to sort it quickly. "You're back early," she said. Rowan handed her the paper. "I need to place an ad." Clara adjusted her glasses and read it once, then again. Her eyes flicked up to his face, assessing. "You sure about this?" "No," Rowan said. "But I'm doing it anyway." Clara nodded. "That's usually how it goes." She tapped the page. "This doesn't promise much. It promises what I can give." She studied him for a moment longer, then slid the paper aside. "It'll run tomorrow. Responses come slow this time of year." "That's fine." Outside, as Rowan mounted Ash, he felt no relief. Just the dull sense of something set in motion. Days passed. Winter settled deeper. Rowan worked from dawn to dark, mending what he could, hauling water when the pump faltered, cutting firewood until his shoulders burned. At night, he ate alone, listening to the radio crackle with Christmas music from Cheyenne stations too far away to feel real. Responses began to arrive by the end of the week. Not many. A widow from Idaho who wanted a warm place but no work. A young woman chasing romance who asked if Rowan owned horses like in the movies. Rowan folded those letters carefully and set them aside. He didn't throw them away. He knew better than to disrespect desperation. Then, 3 days before Christmas, another envelope came. The handwriting was neat, compact, deliberate. No loops, no unnecessary flourish. Rowan opened it slowly. "My name is Elowin Hart, though most people call me Wynne. I'm not looking for romance or rescue. I'm looking for stability and work. Your ad suggests both. If that is accurate, I'm willing to come to Cody before Christmas to discuss terms in person." That was all. Rowan read it twice, then a third time. There was no warmth in the words, but there was clarity. He found himself respecting that immediately. He wrote back the same night. He didn't promise more than he could give. He didn't mention the debt. He told himself he would explain it in person, that it would be easier face to face. The reply came quickly. "I will arrive by stage on the 22nd. If that timing is inconvenient, say so." It was inconvenient. Christmas was 3 days away. The deadline loomed closer with every sunrise. Rowan stared at the letter, then folded it and slid it into his pocket. He wrote back anyway. The morning wind was due to arrive. The wind cut harder than it had all week. Rowan waited at the edge of town with Ash hitched to the wagon, Boone pacing beside him. Other men stood nearby, some waiting for freight, some for family. A few held packages wrapped in brown paper and string. The stage rolled in late, wheels crunching over frozen ground. Rowan felt a tightening in his chest he didn't recognize at first. It wasn't hope. It was something closer to accountability. When the door opened, a woman stepped down without hesitation. Elowin Hart was not what Rowan had expected, though he hadn't known what to expect. She stood just under average height, straight-backed, with a build that suggested endurance rather than softness. Her coat was dark wool, patched at the elbows, worn but clean. Her boots were practical, scuffed at the toes. Dark hair was pulled back into a low knot at her neck, strands already loosening in the wind. Her face was pale from travel, sharp-eyed, with a thin scar near her left eyebrow that looked old. She lifted her own trunk from the stage without waiting for help. It was heavier than it looked. Rowan stepped forward. "Win Hart?" She nodded. "Rowan Creed." Her voice was level. No hesitation. No warmth either. He took the trunk from her. It was heavier than it should have been, packed with whatever life she had left behind. They rode back to Creed Hollow in silence. Win sat upright, hands folded in her lap, eyes tracking the land as it passed. Rowan found himself seeing the ranch through her gaze, the sagging fence, the empty corral, the cracked windmill blade. He waited for her to speak. She didn't. At the house, Rowan carried the trunk inside. Win stepped through the doorway and stopped, taking in the space. The small Christmas tree stood in the corner, unlit. The room was clean but bare. "Thank you," she said. That evening they ate together. Beans, bread, coffee. Win ate without comment, efficient, as if conserving energy. She didn't unpack. She didn't ask questions. After the dishes were done, Rowan sat across from her at the table, the lamp casting long shadows. "There's something you need to know," he said. Win looked up, attentive, waiting. "The ranch is failing," Rowan said. "The bank's given me 11 days. She didn't interrupt. "I should have said that before you came." Silence settled between them, heavier than before. "You should have," Win said finally. Her voice remained calm, but there was a sharpened edge beneath it. "But I'm here now." Rowan nodded, shame tightening his chest. "I won't lie again." Win studied him for a moment, then stood. "I'll stay through Christmas," she said. "After that, we decide what comes next." Outside, the wind pressed against the house. Inside, the terms were set. The first morning Win Hart spent at Creed Hollow arrived without ceremony. No sunlight broke through the windows. The sky remained a dull gray, low and heavy, as if winter had pressed its weight directly onto the land. The wind moved steadily across the open ground, brushing the side of the house, rattling loose boards along the shed. It was the kind of morning that discouraged conversation. Rowan woke before dawn out of habit. The house was cold. The fire burned down to embers. Boone lifted his head from the floor when Rowan sat up, tail thumping once against the boards. The dog's eyes followed every movement, alert and ready, as if he believed the day might require defending. Rowan dressed quietly. He pulled on his boots, stiff with yesterday's cold, and shrugged into his coat. As he reached for the door, he paused. Win's room, the small spare room at the back, was dark and still. He had no idea if she slept well or at all. He reminded himself she hadn't come here for comfort. Outside, the cold struck hard. Rowan crossed the yard toward the barn, Boone trotting ahead, nose low to the ground. Frost clung to the fence rails. The windmill groaned again, the cracked blade shuddering with each turn. Rowan looked up at it, jaw tight, another problem waiting its turn. Ash stood in his stall, ears flicking when Rowan approached. The gelding was large, powerfully built, with a calm face marked by a pale scar along the shoulder where wire had caught him years back. Rowan ran a hand along Ash's neck, steadying both of them. "Easy," he murmured. The horse leaned slightly into the touch. Rowan worked through the early hours without thinking too far ahead. He hauled water. He checked the cattle. He patched a section of fence that had collapsed under snow 2 nights before. The work kept his hands busy, but his mind circled the same questions. Win was here. Christmas was 2 days away. The deadline was closer than he liked to admit. When he returned to the house just after sunrise, smoke was rising from the chimney. He stopped short. Inside, the fire had been rebuilt properly, not coaxed along, not fed carelessly, but arranged with intention. Heat filled the room. Win stood at the stove, sleeves rolled to her forearms, stirring a pot. Her hair was pulled back again, but looser now, strands escaping near her temples. She looked composed, awake in a way that suggested she'd been up for some time. "You don't have to," Rowan began. "I know," Win said without turning. "But you were already working." She set 2 plates on the table. Oatmeal, apples cut small, coffee brewed stronger than Rowan usually bothered with. They ate in near silence, not uncomfortable but careful. Win observed him the way someone assessed a space they might be staying in longer than planned. Rowan noticed she didn't rush. She didn't fill the quiet with questions. After breakfast, she stood and looked around the room. "You have a forge," she said. Rowan blinked. "An old one, behind the barn, hasn't been used in years." "I saw the chimney," she said, "and the anvil through the boards." He hesitated. "It's mostly scrap." Wynne nodded once. "Most things are, until they're not." She pulled on her coat and boots without further explanation and stepped outside. Rowan followed, uncertain, Boone close behind. The forge sat half-collapsed behind the barn, its roof sagging, its firebox filled with ash and debris. Tools lay scattered, rusted and neglected. Rowan watched Wynne take it in. She didn't sigh. She didn't shake her head. She knelt and picked up a pair of tongs, tested the hinge, then set them aside. "Do you mind if I clean it?" she asked. Rowan frowned. "It won't change much." She met his eyes. "It might." He stepped back. "Go ahead." Wynne worked steadily. She cleared ash, stacked bricks, sorted tools by size and shape. Her movements were efficient, practiced. By mid-morning, the forge looked less like a grave and more like a place waiting to be used. Rowan watched from the barn doorway for a long moment before returning to his work. He wasn't sure what unsettled him more, the quiet competence, or the fact that she hadn't asked permission beyond the first question. By noon, the sound of metal rang across the yard. Rowan froze, then walked quickly toward the forge. Wynne stood at the anvil, hammer in hand, striking a piece of heated iron. The fire burned clean, smoke rising straight despite the wind. Her stance was balanced, shoulders squared, movements precise. She didn't look up when Rowan approached. "I rebuilt the firebox," she said. "The bellows still work." Rowan stared. "How long have you been doing this?" "Since I was a child," she replied. "My aunt ran a smithy outside Rawlins. I learned there." She lifted the iron, examined the shape, then struck again. Sparks scattered across the snow and died quickly. Rowan felt something shift, not hope exactly, but awareness. He'd been looking at his problems as fixed. Wynne looked at them as unfinished. That afternoon, a man rode up from the neighboring property. His name was Calvin Reese, mid-40s, lean, with a beard that had gone gray early. Calvin had lost his brother in a ranch accident years back and carried himself like a man who trusted tools more than people. "I heard noise," Calvin said, dismounting. "Figured either something broke or someone fixed it." Wynne set the hammer down and wiped her hands. "I'm fixing it." Calvin studied her, skeptical but curious. He held up a bent latch from his saddlebag. "Think you can do something with this?" Wynne examined it briefly. "Yes." Calvin watched as she heated, shaped, and reinforced the metal. When she handed it back, it was stronger than before. "That'll hold," Calvin said, nodding. "What do I owe you?" Wynne named a fair price. Calvin paid without argument. "I'll mention it," he said to Rowan. "People need things fixed this time of year." After he left, Rowan stood beside the forge, unsure what to say. Wynne resumed working, as if nothing remarkable had occurred. That night, Rowan updated his ledger. One entry, small but real. Dinner was quieter than the night before. Wynne's hands were red from heat and cold, but steady. Rowan noticed she wrapped them carefully before sleeping. Snow fell again, heavier this time. On Christmas Eve morning, Rowan woke to the sound of steady hammering. It was still dark. He lay there for a moment, listening. The rhythm was deliberate, controlled, not rushed. Rowan dressed quickly and stepped outside. The forge glowed against the darkness, orange light cutting through the cold. Wynne stood there again, working. Sweat darkened her collar despite the freezing air. She didn't stop when she saw him. "What are you making?" Rowan asked. "Hinges," she replied. "Doors don't close right in this place." He watched her work. He noticed the way she measured twice before striking, the way she adjusted when the metal resisted. She wasn't fighting it. She was listening to it. By mid-morning, 2 more people arrived. A teamster with a cracked hook, a ranch hand with a dull blade. Wynne took the work, quoted prices, delivered results. Rowan kept track. The numbers were still small, but the pattern was new. That afternoon, Denton Vale rode past the property line. He didn't stop. He didn't wave, but he looked, and Rowan knew Vale understood what he was seeing. As evening settled, Wynne finally set the hammer down. She flexed her fingers, then wrapped them again. Rowan handed her a cup of coffee. "You don't have to do this," he said. She took the cup. "I know." They stood there, watching the forge cool. Tomorrow was Christmas. The deadline remained unchanged. Nothing had been solved, but something had started. Christmas Day arrived without softness. The cold held firm through the night, and by morning the land lay quiet under a thin, clean layer of snow that reflected what little light the sky offered. There was no sunrise to speak of, only a gradual brightening that made edges visible again. Creed Hollow looked the same as it had the day before, worn, imperfect, standing, but the day carried weight all the same. Rowan woke before the alarm of habit could pull him up. The house was warm enough to breathe easily. The stove had been fed during the night. He noticed that first, then the smell. Coffee. Real coffee, not the watered-down stretch he'd been making. Boone lay near the door, awake, tail moving once when Rowan sat up. The dog's muzzle was dusted with gray now that hadn't been there the year before. He was still young, but winter aged everything a little. In the kitchen, Wynne stood at the counter, slicing bread. She wore a sweater that had been mended at both elbows, dark trousers tucked into her boots, hair pulled back with a strip of cloth. Her movements were steady, deliberate. She looked like someone who didn't expect the day to give her anything freely. "I didn't know if you marked it," she said, nodding toward the small table. Rowan followed her gaze. She had set a simple centerpiece there, a few pine branches tied together with twine, a single red ribbon looped around them. It wasn't decorative so much as intentional. "I usually don't," Rowan said. "My mother did. After she passed, it felt like pretending." Wynne considered that. "Does it still?" Rowan didn't answer right away. He poured coffee, set a mug in front of her. "I don't know," he said finally. "It feels different this year." They ate quietly. Oatmeal again, but with honey Wynne must have found in the cupboard. Outside, the cattle shifted, low sounds carrying through the cold air. Somewhere down the road, a bell rang from a distant church, thin and persistent. After breakfast, Rowan went out to tend the animals. Wynne followed him this time without comment, pulling on her coat. The yard showed signs of her work now, tools stacked neatly near the forge, ash cleared, a tarp secured against the wind. The forge itself sat dark but ready, like it was waiting for a signal. Ash stood patiently as Rowan saddled him. The horse's breath rose in slow clouds. Rowan ran a hand along his neck, noting the way Ash leaned into the touch, solid and calm. That steadiness had come from years of consistent handling, from a time before everything had become uncertain. They worked through the morning without speaking much. Wynne took notes on what needed fixing. Hinges that sagged, a latch that didn't seat properly, a wheel rim that would need attention. Rowan appreciated that she didn't try to do everything at once. She made lists. She prioritized. Just after noon, a wagon approached from the road. Rowan straightened, tension rising automatically. Boone lifted his head and barked once, then went still. The wagon slowed near the gate, and a man climbed down carefully, favoring his left leg. He was in his late 50s, tall but stooped, with a thick gray beard trimmed close to his jaw. His coat was old but well cared for. His eyes were sharp, watchful. "Morning," he called. "I'm Henry Collins." Rowan nodded. "Rowan Creed." Henry glanced briefly at Wynne, then back at Rowan. "Calvin Reese sent me, said you had someone fixing iron." Wynne stepped forward. "I am." Henry studied her openly, not unkindly but without pretense. "I run the livery near the East Road," he said. "Had a hitch snap last night, nearly lost a team." Wynne asked to see it. Henry brought the broken piece from the wagon, his movements careful. He had the manner of a man who'd learned patience through consequence. Later, Rowan would learn that Henry had lost his wife in a wagon accident years back. Since then, he trusted preparation more than luck. Wynne examined the metal, turned it in her hands. "I can reinforce this," she said. "It won't snap the same way again." Henry nodded. "What'll it cost?" She named a price slightly higher than before. Henry didn't argue. "Christmas," he said simply, and handed over the money. While Wynne worked, Henry spoke quietly with Rowan, watching her from the corner of his eye. "She knows what she's doing," he said. "That's rare. People pretend. Iron doesn't let you." When Wynne handed the repaired hitch back, Henry tested it once, then twice. "Good work," he said. He hesitated, then added, "I'll spread the word." After he left, Rowan updated the ledger. 2 entries now, still small, still not enough, but the line was moving. Mid-afternoon brought another visitor. A young man named Toby Larkins, early 20s, thin, nervous, with hair that refused to stay under his cap. He worked for a freight outfit out of town and brought a bent hook and a cracked ring. Wynn took the job. Toby lingered, watching her work, asking questions. She answered briefly but clearly. Rowan noticed the way she kept the conversation on the task, not the person. As the day wore on, clouds thickened. Snow began again, soft at first, then heavier. By late afternoon, the light faded quickly. Wynn finished the last job and banked the forge fire. Her hands were red and raw, knuckles nicked. Rowan handed her a cloth and a small tin of salve his mother had made years ago. "Use it," he said. She swore by it. Wynn took it, surprised. "Thank you." They went inside as evening settled. Rowan lit the tree for the first time that season. The lights hummed faintly, casting uneven color on the walls. Boone lay near the stove, content, tail flicking when Rowan passed. Dinner was better than the night before. Rowan had roasted what little meat he could spare. Wynn added herbs from a jar she'd unpacked that afternoon. They ate slowly. "You don't have to keep doing this," Rowan said at last. "The forge, the people. You came here expecting something else." Wynn set her fork down. "I came expecting honesty," she said. "I didn't get it at first, but I'm here now. And this," she gestured toward the room, the light, the warmth. "This is work that matters." Outside, hooves crunched on snow. Rowan stiffened. He stood and stepped onto the porch. Denton Vale sat on a tall, well-groomed horse, posture relaxed, coat immaculate. The animal was restless, shifting weight, not used to waiting in the cold. "Merry Christmas," Vale called, his smile easy. Rowan stepped down from the porch. "You've said your piece." Vale glanced past him, toward the forge, the stacked tools. "Seems you've found a distraction." "It's work," Rowan said. Vale's eyes flicked toward Wynn, visible through the window. "Temporary." Wynn appeared beside Rowan then, calm, hands folded inside her coat sleeves. She looked at Vale directly. "You don't need to be here," she said. Vale studied her. "And yet I am." Rowan felt the familiar heat rise, the edge of his temper pressing forward. He forced himself to breathe. "Leave," Rowan said. Vale smiled again, thinner this time. 11 days, he repeated. "Enjoy your holiday." He turned his horse and rode off, the sound of hooves fading into the snow. Inside, the warmth felt more fragile. That night, after cleaning up, Rowan sat at the table with the ledger. Wynn joined him. They reviewed the numbers together. She didn't flinch. "It's not enough," Rowan said. "Not yet," Wynn replied. "Tomorrow we work again." Christmas ended quietly. No miracle. No reprieve, just work waiting in the morning. But when Rowan banked the fire and turned off the tree lights, he realized something had shifted. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt occupied. The day after Christmas felt thinner, as if the holiday had taken something with it when it passed. The lights were off. The pine branches on the table had already begun to dry, needles loosening and falling when touched. Outside, the cold didn't ease. It never did just because a date changed. Rowan was awake before dawn again, not because he wanted to be, but because worry had learned his sleep patterns. The house was quiet. Wynn's door was closed. Boone lay stretched near the stove, one eye opening when Rowan stood. The dog was 4 now, his muzzle beginning to gray, his body still strong but less reckless than it had been as a pup. He followed Rowan out of habit, not excitement. The sky was barely lightening when Rowan stepped outside. Snow had fallen again overnight, not deep, but enough to soften the ground and mute sound. Creed Hollow looked still, almost peaceful, the way things often did when they were under strain. Rowan fed the cattle, checked water, and moved through the morning tasks without rushing. He noticed the changes Wynn had made in just a few days. Tools stored properly, a clear path to the forge, scraps sorted instead of left to rot. It wasn't transformation, it was order. And order had a way of changing how work felt. When he returned to the house, Wynn was already up, dressed and lacing her boots. She looked tired, but steady. There was a bruise forming along one knuckle on her right hand, dark and swollen. "You don't have to start before light," Rowan said. "I do if I want daylight for finishing," she replied. "Heat carries better when the sun's up." She poured coffee and handed him a mug without ceremony. The gesture was simple, but Rowan noticed it stayed with him longer than the warmth. By mid-morning, the forge was lit again. The sound of hammer on iron carried across the land, steady and purposeful. Rowan worked nearby, repairing a section of fence while keeping half an eye on the road. He wasn't waiting for Denton Vale. He was waiting for people. The first to arrive was a woman Rowan didn't recognize. She came on foot, bundled in a long coat, her shoulders hunched against the wind. She was in her early 50s, with weathered skin and dark hair streaked heavily with gray. Her posture was stiff, as if she carried pain she didn't talk about. "My name's Ruth Calder," she said. "I live south of the creek. Heard there's someone fixing iron here." Wynne wiped her hands and listened as Ruth produced a broken latch from her coat pocket. "Front door," Ruth said. "Doesn't hold anymore. I live alone." Wynne examined the latch carefully, then nodded. "I can reinforce it and add a second catch. It'll hold against wind and pressure." Ruth's shoulders eased slightly. "That'd be good." She paid in cash, exact, folded neatly. When Wynne handed the repaired latch back later, Ruth tested it with both hands, then nodded once. "I'll sleep better," she said simply, and left. The next visitor came before noon, a ranch hand named Eli Mercer, late 20s, broad-backed, with a crooked nose that had been broken more than once. He worked on a spread north of town and had the look of a man who took hits without complaint. He brought a dull, splitting wedge and asked if it could be retempered. Wynne explained what that would involve, the limits of the metal, the cost. Eli listened, then shrugged. "Worth it." Rowan noticed how people responded to her. She didn't sell hope. She sold clarity. It made them trust her. By early afternoon, the ledger had 3 new entries. Still small numbers, still not enough to solve anything. But Rowan found himself turning the pages back and forth, not to calculate totals, but to confirm the pattern was real. That was when the truck came up the road. It was older, a dark green pickup with rust along the wheel wells, moving slower than necessary. Rowan straightened. Boone stood, ears forward. The driver climbed out carefully. He was tall and lean, with a long face and deep-set eyes. His beard was thick and untrimmed, more gray than brown. He wore a coat that had been patched so many times it looked like a map of former winters. "Name's Arthur Bell," he said. His voice was low, steady. "I run freight between Cody and Powell. My rig's down." Arthur led them to the back of the truck and showed them a cracked bracket supporting the rear suspension. One crouched to examine it, running her fingers along the fracture. "This won't hold under load," she said. "You've been lucky." Arthur nodded. "Luck runs out." The job took most of the afternoon. Wynne worked methodically, heating, shaping, reinforcing the metal. Rowan assisted where he could, hauling coal, steadying pieces, learning by watching. Arthur stayed nearby, silent, his eyes tracking every step. When Wynne finished, Arthur tested the repair, then nodded. "How much?" She named the price. Arthur didn't hesitate. "I'll tell people," he said. "Drivers talk." After he left, Rowan leaned against the fence, shoulders heavy. "You're building something," he said. Wynne didn't look up from cleaning her tools. "I'm using what's here." The sun dipped low, throwing long shadows across the yard. The forge fire burned down. Wynne wrapped her hands again, slower this time. Inside, Rowan cooked. Simple food, enough. They ate at the table with the ledger between them. "You could slow down," Rowan said. "You don't need to work yourself raw." Wynne met his eyes. "Neither do you, but you do." Rowan didn't argue. He knew what it looked like when someone worked because stopping felt dangerous. That night, the wind picked up hard. Snow rattled against the windows. Rowan lay awake longer than usual, listening to the house creak. At some point, he heard Wynne moving quietly in the kitchen, then the soft scrape of a chair being pulled out. He stayed where he was. Some things needed space. The next morning brought worse weather. The temperature dropped sharply, and ice formed along the edges of the troughs. Rowan spent hours chipping it free. Wynne delayed lighting the forge, watching the sky, judging the wind. Near noon, a boy appeared at the gate. He couldn't have been more than 12. Thin, sharp-faced, with dark hair sticking out from under a too large hat. He hovered uncertainly, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Rowan approached. "Can I help you?" The boy swallowed. "Name's Milo. Mr. Reese said there's work here." Rowan glanced toward the forge. Wynne watched from a distance. "What kind of work?" Rowan asked. Milo shrugged. "Anything. I can carry, I can hold things. I don't mind the cold. His coat was thin, his boots worn. Rowan recognized the look. He'd worn it himself once. Wynne joined them. She studied Milo for a moment, then nodded toward the scrap pile. Start by sorting that. Iron from steel. I'll show you how. Milo's face lit with focus, not excitement, but purpose. He worked carefully, asking questions, listening closely. Wynne corrected him without sharpness. Rowan noticed the way she didn't patronize him. By the end of the day, Milo's hands were black with grime, but he stood straighter. Wynne handed him a few dollars. Come back tomorrow, she said. If you want. Milo nodded hard. I will. After he left, Rowan exhaled slowly. You didn't have to pay him. Wynne shrugged. He worked. That night, Rowan updated the ledger again. The numbers were still far from enough. The deadline hadn't moved, but the page was filling. Rowan closed the book and sat back. Even if this doesn't save the place, he said, you've done more than anyone could expect. Wynne considered that. I didn't come to meet expectations, she said. I came to work. Outside, the forge sat cold and quiet. The land waited. Nothing had been solved, but the ranch was no longer silent. The morning arrived with no patience left in it. The cold sharpened overnight, turning every surface brittle. Frost sealed the troughs again, and the wind came harder from the north, carrying the promise of more snow by evening. Rowan felt it in his joints before he stepped outside. There were fewer days left now, not many enough to count casually. Boone followed him across the yard, slower than usual, favoring his back left leg for the first few steps before the stiffness eased. The dog was nearing 5, still strong, but Winter took small payments from everyone. Rowan made a mental note to check Boone's paw pads later. Small neglects had a way of growing into real problems. At the fence line, Ash waited patiently, ears angled forward, breath rising in steady clouds. The gelding had learned Rowan's moods over the years and stood quietly when tensions settled heavy. Rowan rested his forehead briefly against Ash's neck, grounding himself before the day pulled him apart again. Behind the barn, the forge stood dark. Wynne hadn't lit it yet. That alone told Rowan something was different. Inside the house, Wynne sat at the table with the ledger open in front of her. Her coat was still on, gloves set beside the book. Her hair was pulled back tighter than usual, face drawn, eyes focused. She looked like someone who had reached a conclusion and was checking the facts one last time. You're up early, Rowan said. She didn't look up. We're out of time to pretend the numbers will stretch. Rowan poured coffee and sat across from her. The ledger lay open between them, pages marked with careful entries. Repairs completed, small payments received, honest work, honest money, not enough. How many days? Wynne asked. Rowan exhaled. 5. She nodded once. Then we stop thinking like we're fixing a fence and start thinking like we're trying to keep a roof over the house. Rowan stiffened slightly. Meaning? Wynne closed the ledger and met his eyes. We've proven there's demand. People trust the work, but walk-in repairs won't close the gap, not in 5 days. Rowan leaned back, rubbing a hand over his jaw. So what are you suggesting? She hesitated just long enough for him to notice. We need larger orders, or better margins, something that brings people out of their way. Rowan thought of Denton Vale, of the way pressure arrived wearing polite words. That kind of attention cuts both ways. I know, Wynne said, but quiet failure is still failure. Before Rowan could respond, the sound of tires on frozen gravel cut through the room. They both turned toward the window. A black sedan rolled into the yard, its lines clean and out of place among the snow and mud. It stopped near the gate. The engine idled for a moment before the door opened. The man who stepped out wasn't Denton Vale. This one was older, late 40s perhaps, tall and solid, with close-cropped hair and a trimmed beard that followed the hard lines of his jaw. He wore a wool coat that fit well, not flashy, and leather gloves that had seen use. His posture suggested discipline, not wealth. His eyes scanned the property quickly, taking in details without lingering. Rowan stood. I'll handle it. Outside, the man waited patiently, hands at his sides, breath visible. Boone barked once, then settled, watching. Rowan Creed? The man asked. That's me. Name's Thomas Garrison, he said. Assistant to the bank manager. I was asked to stop by. Rowan's chest tightened. You usually send letters. Garrison nodded. This close to year's end, they wanted confirmation, visual assessment. Rowan gestured toward the land. You see what there is. Garrison studied the barn, the cattle, the windmill. His gaze paused briefly on the forge, on the stacked tools beside it. I see activity, he said. That won't change the balance, Rowan replied. Probably not, Garrison said honestly. But it will be noted. He handed Rowan a folded document. 5 days, he said. After that, the file moves. Rowan took the paper without looking at it. You came all this way to tell me what I already know? Garrison hesitated, then spoke quietly. I came because I was asked to confirm something else. Rowan waited. There's interest, Garrison said. From a buyer, one willing to move quickly. Rowan's jaw set. Vale. Garrison didn't confirm it. He didn't deny it either. The bank prefers certainty. Rowan met his eyes. So do I. Garrison nodded once, then turned and walked back to his car. The sedan pulled away, tires crunching against the ice, leaving the yard quieter than before. Inside, Wynne was already on her feet. That was the bank, she said. Yes. And? Rowan shook his head. Nothing new. She studied his face. You're lying. Rowan exhaled sharply. They're ready to move. Wynne's mouth tightened. Then we don't have 5 days, we have fewer. They stood in silence for a moment. Outside, the wind pushed harder. A voice cut through it. Mr. Creed? Milo stood at the gate, stamping his feet to keep warm. His coat looked thinner than it should have been for the temperature. He carried a small sack slung over his shoulder. Rowan waved him in. What's that? Milo lifted the sack. Scrap. Mr. Bell said I could take what they don't need anymore. Figured it might help. Wynne stepped forward, crouched and looked inside. Old bolts, bent rods, usable material. It helps, she said. Thank you. Milo's shoulders straightened slightly at that. As the day unfolded, people came steadily, not in crowds but consistently. A rancher with a gate hinge, a shop owner with a broken lock, a woman who brought in a decorative bracket and asked if it could be made stronger without losing the shape. Wynne handled each request carefully, quoting fair prices, setting realistic timelines. Rowan noticed something else. People lingered, they talked, they watched the forge, they asked questions. By mid-afternoon, a man Rowan hadn't seen before arrived on horseback. He was in his early 40s, lean, with sharp cheekbones, and a dark beard worn long but neatly trimmed. His hat was old, creased by years of use. His eyes were quick, calculating. Name's Lewis Cade, he said. I manage the Red Bluff supply store. Rowan knew the place. Red Bluff was 50 miles south, larger, busier. I've heard about the forge, Lewis continued. Word travels. Wynne wiped her hands and listened. I've got customers asking for durable hardware, Lewis said. Not the factory junk, real work, hinges, latches, gate fittings. Wynne nodded slowly. Custom work takes time. I know, Lewis said. I'm not asking for cheap, I'm asking for consistent. Rowan felt his pulse quicken. What kind of volume? Lewis named numbers that made Rowan's stomach tighten. Not impossible, but close. We'd need an agreement, Wynne said carefully. Materials, timelines. Lewis smiled slightly. That's what contracts are for. They agreed to talk again the next day. When Lewis rode away, Rowan turned to Wynne. That's not a small thing. No, she said. It's not. But we can't fulfill it immediately. She nodded. Not alone. As evening fell, the forge fire dimmed. Wynne wrapped her hands slowly, pain evident now. Rowan handed her coffee, then sat beside her at the table with the ledger. That kind of order won't save us in 5 days, he said. It won't, she agreed. But it proves something. What? That this place isn't finished. Rowan stared at the numbers, then closed the book. Vale will move faster. Yes, Wynne said, which means we have to move smarter. Later that night, after Milo had gone and Boone was asleep by the stove, Wynn stood near the window, looking out at the land. "There's a Christmas market in Red Bluff," she said suddenly. Rowan looked up. "That's 2 days from now." "People travel for it," she said. "3 counties, ranchers, teamsters, store owners." Rowan shook his head. "That's a risk." "So is standing still," Wynn replied. They didn't decide that night, but the idea didn't leave the room. Outside, the wind eased slightly. Snow began to fall again, quiet and steady. The clock was still ticking. They didn't decide at once. The idea of Red Bluff sat between them through the night, unspoken but present, like a draft that found every crack in the house. Rowan lay awake, listening to the wind rake the siding and the low, steady breathing of Boone by the stove. 5 days had become fewer in his head. He counted wrong on purpose, as if miscounting could buy him time. By morning, the weather answered for them. The sky cleared into a hard blue, cold enough to sting the lungs. Snow from the night before had crusted over, passable if you knew the road and didn't rush. Rowan stepped outside and looked south, 50 miles, longer in winter. Wynn joined him on the porch, coat already on, hair pulled back tight. She held a small notebook in one hand. "If we go," she said, "we go tonight. Market opens tomorrow afternoon. We'd need inventory ready and the wagon packed before dark." Rowan rubbed his hands together, feeling the ache settle in. "If we go and it fails, we lose time we don't have." "If we don't go," Wynn replied, "we lose quietly." They stood there a moment, watching the windmill turn unevenly. Rowan nodded once. "We go." The day became a race measured in small decisions. Wynn moved to the forge immediately, not to take new repairs, but to finish what she'd been building in the margins of nights. She uncovered pieces Rowan hadn't seen yet, hinges shaped with clean lines and reinforced pins, latches with simple decorative bends that didn't weaken the steel, a set of fireplace tools balanced for use, not display. She hadn't been hiding them, she just hadn't announced them. Wynn believed in finishing before talking. Rowan worked the other side of the plan. He checked the wagon, tightened bolts, greased axles. He chose blankets thick enough to protect iron from road shock and cold. Ash stood harnessed, calm as ever, ears flicking toward the forge with every ring of the hammer. Boone followed Rowan step for step, tail low but steady, sensing urgency without panic. Milo arrived before noon, cheeks red from the cold, eyes bright with purpose. He stopped short when he saw the wagon half-packed. "You're going somewhere," he said. "Red Bluff," Rowan replied. Milo nodded like he'd already guessed. "I can help load." Wynn handed him a stack of wrapped pieces and showed him how to brace them. "Careful with the edges," she said. "They'll cut through cloth if you let them." Milo worked carefully, serious beyond his years. When the wagon was nearly full, Wynn handed him a few dollars. "For the time," she said. Milo shook his head. "I'll earn it later," he said, then hesitated. "Good luck." By late afternoon, clouds gathered again, low and gray. The temperature dropped. Rowan took one last look around Creed Hollow, the sagging fence, the dark forge, the house with its small unlit tree visible through the window. He locked the door, a gesture that felt heavier than usual. They left. Just before dusk, the road south narrowed quickly, the world reduced to the rhythm of hooves and the creak of the wagon. Rowan drove with both hands steady on the reins. Wynn sat beside him, the notebook tucked into her coat. Boone lay between them, head up, watching the dark like it might move. They made slow but steady progress. Snow reflected what little light the moon offered, enough to see the road's edge if you trusted it. Rowan didn't talk much. He needed the quiet to keep his focus. Wynn broke it only when necessary, pointing out a drift, suggesting a pause to let Ash breathe. Near midnight, the wind picked up again. Snow fell harder, blowing sideways. Rowan pulled the wagon to the lee of a low stand of trees. They wrapped the iron tighter, checked the harness, shared coffee from a thermos that had gone lukewarm. "You can turn back," Rowan said, not looking at her. Wynn shook her head. "So can you." They didn't. Dawn came pale and late. Red Bluff appeared out of the gray like a promise that didn't want to be trusted. The town was larger than Cody, its main street wider, buildings closer together. Smoke rose from chimneys, lanterns still burned along the sidewalks. They paid the stall fee with money that made Rowan's jaw tighten. Wynn didn't flinch. "We don't sell," she said. "We still learn." They set up near the center of the market. Not prime space, but visible. Rowan built a simple frame from spare boards. Wynne arranged the iron with intention. Functional pieces in front, finer work elevated where the light could catch it. She stepped back once, adjusted a latch by half an inch, then nodded. People passed. Many didn't stop. Rowan felt the old weight creep back in. He kept his hands busy, straightening, wiping frost from metal. Wynne stood still, watching faces, not forcing attention. An older rancher stopped first. He was broad and thick through the shoulders, with a white mustache and hands scarred by decades of work. He picked up a hinge, tested its weight. "Who made this?" he asked. "I did," Wynne said. He looked at her, then at the hinge again. "How much?" She named the price. He nodded and paid without comment. That opened something. A woman examined a latch and smiled faintly. A teamster tested a hook and asked about load limits. Wynne answered clearly, without exaggeration. Rowan handled the money, wrote receipts, his numbers climbing in a way that felt unreal. By midday, they'd sold a third of the inventory. Then Rowan saw Denton Vale at the edge of the crowd. Vale stood with two men, both well-dressed, faces closed. He didn't approach. He watched, counted. Rowan felt the familiar heat rise and forced it down. He kept his voice even when the next customer asked a question. A store owner named Maribel Ortiz stopped next. She was in her 40s, hair pulled into a braid streaked with silver, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. She ran a hardware shop 2 counties east. She examined the work closely. "You take orders?" she asked. "Yes," Wynne said. "On contract," Maribel nodded. "I want a dozen of these to start. If they hold, I'll want more." Wynne wrote details carefully. Rowan's hand shook as he noted the deposit. The afternoon thickened with people. Orders followed sales. The shelves thinned. Wynne moved continuously, wrapping, explaining, writing. Rowan kept pace, the ledger filling with figures he didn't dare total yet. As dusk approached, the last of the inventory sold. The wagon sat lighter, the lockbox heavier. Wynne counted twice. "It's enough," she said quietly. Rowan exhaled and felt his knees threaten to give. He nodded once. They packed quickly and left before Vale could approach. The road home felt shorter, driven by urgency rather than hope. They reached Creed Hollow just before dawn. Rowan unhitched Ash, muscles burning. Wynne carried the lockbox inside and spread the money on the table. She counted again. Every bill, every coin. "The bank opens at 9, Rowan said. "I know." They rode into town as the sky lightened. The bank stood square and solid, the kind of building that didn't care about stories. Inside, Thomas Garrison looked up, surprised. "We're here to settle," Rowan said. The count took time. Garrison checked it twice. Then he nodded. "Debt cleared," he said, stamping the paper. "The property is yours." Outside, Rowan tore down the foreclosure notice and fed it to the forge fire. It curled and burned without ceremony. Back at the house, they made coffee and sat in the quiet. It wasn't a miracle. It was work, counted and earned. The relief didn't arrive all at once. Rowan had expected it to hit him the moment the bank stamped the papers, expected his chest to loosen, his shoulders to drop, the weight to lift cleanly and leave nothing behind. Instead, it came in pieces. Small, quiet pieces that settled slowly, like snow after a storm when the wind finally gives up. Back at Creed Hollow, the land looked the same. The fence still leaned. The windmill blade still needed replacing. The barn roof still leaked when snow turned to sleet. There was no visible line between the day before and the day after, but the paper in Rowan's coat pocket was different now. Ownership, clear, undisputed. He pinned it to the wall above the table, not as a trophy but as a reminder. Wynne noticed and didn't comment. They slept for nearly 12 hours that first night back. Boone didn't move from his place by the stove, his body stretched out fully, as if he understood that guarding wasn't required for once. Ash stood quietly in the corral through the night, head lowered, the kind of rest that came only after long work. Morning came pale and calm. The wind eased, the cold remained, but it felt less sharp, less personal. Wynne was up first. Rowan found her outside, standing near the forge, hands in her coat pockets, looking at the stack of unfilled orders she had copied neatly into her notebook the night before. Her face was tired, but there was something steadier in it now. No urgency, no calculation. "We need to pace this," she said when Rowan joined her. "If we try to meet everything at once, we burn out by spring." Rowan nodded. We'll schedule it. Do it right. That word again. Right. They spent the morning reorganizing instead of rushing. Tools were cleaned and rehung. Scrap was sorted again, more carefully this time. Rowan repaired the forge roof properly, replacing boards instead of patching them. Wynne set up a workbench with space to move, insisting on clear walkways and labeled bins. "It's not about speed," she said when Rowan raised an eyebrow. "It's about not losing time to mistakes." By afternoon, the first visitor arrived. Henry Collins rode in quietly, his posture careful as ever. He dismounted and removed his hat before speaking, revealing hair gone nearly white beneath it. "I heard," he said simply. Rowan nodded. "It's settled." Henry looked around, then back at Wynne. "I've got another job when you're ready," he said. "No rush." "Next week," Wynne replied. "I'll write you in." Henry smiled faintly. "Good." Word moved faster now, not rumors, not speculation, but confirmation, the kind that stuck. 2 days later, Lewis Cade sent a written agreement from Red Bluff outlining the terms of the supply order. Wynne read it twice, marked revisions, sent it back with clear conditions. Rowan watched her work through it with calm authority, noticed how she didn't rush just because the opportunity was real. "Confidence isn't loud," she said when Rowan commented. "It's consistent." Milo returned every morning after that, coat still too thin but eyes brighter. Wynne paid him for real work, sorting, carrying, learning. She corrected him when he rushed. Rowan caught Milo practicing knots in the barn during breaks, determination etched into his thin face. On the 4th day after Red Bluff, Denton Vale came again. This time he didn't ride into the yard. He stopped at the property line. Rowan saw him first, standing beside the fence, hat in hand, posture less relaxed than before. The expensive horse shifted uneasily beneath him, sensitive to tension. Rowan walked out alone. Vale spoke first. "I hear congratulations are in order." Rowan didn't respond. Vale glanced toward the forge, where smoke rose steady and controlled. "You made a mess of my timetable." Rowan met his eyes. "That wasn't my concern." Vale studied him for a long moment. There was no smile now, just assessment. "You'll slip again," he said finally. "People always do." "Maybe," Rowan replied, "but not quietly." Vale snorted once, a sound between irritation and reluctant respect. He turned his horse and rode away without another word. Wynne hadn't come outside. She hadn't needed to. Winter moved on, slowly, deliberately, the kind of winter that tested repairs and people alike. They didn't celebrate, not properly. There was no feast, no gathering. Instead, there were full days of work and evenings of planning. Rowan fixed the windmill blade at last. Wynne trained Milo to recognize metal by sound alone. Boone took to sleeping near the forge, his coat thickening, eyes half closed but alert. By February, the forge ran 5 days a week. Wynne limited orders deliberately. She took on work that fit the rhythm they could sustain. The supply order from Red Bluff expanded gradually. Maribel Ortiz sent payment early on the second shipment, along with a note that read simply, "Quality holds." Rowan focused on the land. He repaired fences with intention this time, not desperation. He brought in feed early. He planned for spring instead of reacting to winter. They ate together every night, not ceremonially, just together. They didn't talk about marriage, not yet. Neither of them was interested in rushing something that had been built under pressure. What grew between them was quieter than romance. It lived in routine, in trust earned through follow-through. One evening, as snow fell lightly and the forge fire died down, Rowan sat at the table updating the ledger. Wynne leaned against the counter, stretching her hands. "You stayed," Rowan said, not looking up. "Yes." "You didn't have to." Wynne considered that. "Neither did you." He smiled faintly at that. Spring arrived late, reluctant. Grass pushed through in patches, green against the brown. 3 calves were born within a week, healthy and loud. Rowan stood in the pasture one morning watching them wobble upright. Boone circling carefully, instincts tempered by training. By April, a young man named Ezra Pike, no relation to Denton Vale, came asking about apprenticeship. He was 19, broad-shouldered, with hands already scarred by careless labor and eyes that still believed effort paid off. Wynne put him to work under Milo's supervision, deliberately reversing the hierarchy to teach patience. "You don't learn by being the strongest," she said. You learn by listening. Rowan watched that unfold with quiet approval. In late May, Rowan and Wynne stood at the fence line looking out over Creed Hollow. The land wasn't healed. It was improving. Slowly. Honestly. "It's not what you advertised," Wynne said. Rowan glanced at her. "No. You promised land, a roof, and a future." "The roof still leaks," Rowan said. "The future's uncertain." Wynne nodded. "That's accurate." He waited. "But it's real," she added. "That matters." They didn't make it dramatic. They married in June with witnesses who understood what survival looked like. No speeches, no promises beyond what had already been proven. The forge burned late that night. Music drifted from a borrowed radio. Milo danced badly. Boone slept under the table, content. Creed Hollow remained what it had always been, wind-scoured, imperfect, demanding. But it stood. And that was enough. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or bright light. Sometimes they come quietly, through tired hands that refuse to stop working, through honesty spoken too late but still spoken, through strangers who choose to stay when leaving would be easier. This story is not about luck. It's about grace. Because when everything seemed lost, what carried them through wasn't money or strength or pride. It was faith. Faith that effort still matters, that kindness still returns, and that God often works through ordinary people who simply refuse to give up. In our own lives, we may not face foreclosure notices or frozen ranches, but we all know what it feels like to stand in a quiet moment and wonder if help will ever come. If you're in that place today, remember this: God may not remove the storm immediately, but He will give you the strength to stand until it passes. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it with someone who needs encouragement today. Leave a comment and tell us what part spoke to you or where you are watching from. Your words may comfort someone else more than you realize. And if you believe in stories of hope, second chances, and the quiet work of God in everyday lives, please subscribe to the channel. It helps these stories reach those who need them most. May God bless you, protect your loved ones, and never let you walk through fear alone. Until next time, stay kind, stay faithful, and remember, even the quietest miracles are still miracles.